Ever since I was a little boy, I dreamed of traveling the world. Now, while many kids were watching cartoons, I found myself fascinated by travel documentaries and television shows that showcased incredible places around the globe. I remember sitting at my grandmother's house watching the Travel Channel, completely captivated by beaches, mountains, and cultures I had never experienced before. And whenever I saw a destination that inspired me, I would write it down in a notebook. Even as a child, I believed the world was far too beautiful to spend an entire lifetime just in one place. But dreams and reality don't always seem to align. It was really funny because as a kid, whenever somebody would ask me what I wanted to be when I grow up, my answer would often be I wanted to be a tourist. That's how much I really wanted to travel. Growing up, my family faced financial struggles, and international travel just felt completely out of reach. And on top of that, I am autistic, and I have dealt with social anxiety for much of my life. So the thought of navigating airports, flying across the world, and visiting a country where I'd never been before felt very overwhelming and overstimulating. I always imagined, though, traveling with someone else because I didn't think I could do it alone. But unfortunately, there was never anyone who would go with me because life, finances, and timing just always seemed to get in the way. Eventually, I began to accept that traveling might remain nothing more than a dream. Then, in 2018, something changed. By this point, I wasn't really watching travel videos on TV. I was now watching them through YouTube, and travel videos and travel vloggers were easily accessible now and were pretty much at my fingertips. So now I was watching all of these travel vlogs online, and one day I discovered several videos about the Philippines. And before then, I had never seriously considered visiting the country. My interests had always leaned towards places like Japan, Thailand, or South Korea. But as I watched more videos, I became fascinated by the Philippines. Its breathtaking islands, vibrant culture, and above all, the kindness of its people. That interest grew even stronger after remembering a presentation I had attended in college. A guest speaker from the Philippines introduced our class to the country's history, geography, and culture. And looking back, I realized that was the first time I truly began to appreciate what the Philippines had to offer. The more I learned, the more one thought stayed in my mind. What if I actually did this? The problem was, I had absolutely no idea where to begin. I had only flown once before in my entire life, and that was on a middle school band trip where the adults handled everything. I had never booked a flight, navigated an airport before, applied for a passport, or planned an international trip. I was starting completely from scratch. So I did what many people do when they don't know something. I started learning. I watched countless videos explaining everything from airport security to finding the correct gate, reading boarding passes, and even locating my seat on an airplane. I applied for my passport, received the vaccinations I needed, and began purchasing the supplies I need for the trip. Every small step made the dream feel a little bit more real. But there was still one major thing missing: the plane ticket. I spoke with the travel agent, and her name was Jingle. I still remember her name to this day. And together we planned a trip to the Philippines for December of 2018. After our conversation, she emailed me the itinerary and explained that the price would only remain available for a limited time. I remember lying on my bed, just staring at my phone, my finger hovering over the purchase button. My palms were sweaty. I was nervous and anxious all at the same time. It wasn't just about spending the money, it was the realization that once I pressed that button, there was no turning back. This wasn't going to be another dream or another maybe someday. It would become real. For what felt like an eternity, I stared at the screen, wrestling with fear and doubt. Could I really do this? Would I regret it? Was I making the biggest mistake of my life? As the booking deadline approached, I finally took a deep breath and pressed the button. A few seconds later, the the confirmation message appeared. My trip was officially booked. I remember at that very moment falling back onto my bed in complete disbelief. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just dreaming about seeing the world, I was actually going. With my ticket purchased, the dream suddenly became very real. Over the next several months, I continued preparing. I packed my luggage, double-checked every document, and researched everything I could think of. I wanted to eliminate as many unknowns as possible because for someone with autism, uncertainty can be one of the most difficult things to face. One decision I made may surprise some people. I didn't tell my family where I was really going. Now at this time, I had roommates, and I told my roommates that I was going to be spending Christmas with my family. And I told my family I was going on a college trip to Hawaii. So that's the story I came up with, and looking back now, I do feel bad, but I did tell them after the fact when I got back, and yeah, they were a little bit surprised, but I think they understood. And I didn't lie to them because I wanted to deceive them. I simply knew that the people who loved me would worry. They would question my decision, point out every possible danger, and encourage me to stay home. And after investing so much time, money, and emotional energy into this dream, I knew that if I allowed too many doubts into my mind, I might convince myself not to go. So, I kept my plans mostly to myself. Finally, the morning arrived. My alarm went off around 4 o'clock in the morning. I gathered my luggage, called an Uber, and headed to the Savannah airport. I remember sitting quietly during that ride, staring out the window and thinking, this is actually happening. Despite all of my fears, I had made it to the airport. Now, I had read online and some of my research I did that for an international flight, it's good to get to the airport 3 hours in advance, so I did that. But upon doing so, I later found out that it wasn't really necessary, that I could have easily made my flight after being there just an hour early. But hey, I was just trying to follow every little thing that I learned. To my surprise, once I made it to the airport, all the research I did leading up to this point actually paid off. I checked in, printed my boarding passes, made my way through TSA, and found my gate without any major problems. Every small success gave me a little bit more confidence. For the first time, I started to realize that maybe I was more capable than I had believed. Then it was time to board the plane. As I settled into my window seat, I looked out across the runway and couldn't stop smiling. Just years of dreaming had led to this single moment. The plane began to move. As the wheels lifted off the ground, it felt like I was leaving behind more than just my hometown. I was leaving behind years of self-doubt. The first few flights went smoothly, but with every airport and every connection, the reality of what I was doing became more overwhelming. Eventually, I found myself sitting in Dallas, waiting for the next leg of my journey. I remember going to the bar in the airport, and it was like 9 a.m. at this point, and people were already drinking, which surprised me, but hey, this is Texas after all. And when I was sitting there waiting on my next flight, that's when the fear really set in. I started asking myself every question imaginable. What if this is a mistake? What if I can't handle it? What if something goes wrong? For a brief moment, I seriously considered giving up. I thought about buying a ticket back home and pretending none of this ever happened. But then I was thinking I already sent my checked luggage to Manila, so I would lose a lot of stuff, and I didn't want to lose out on my luggage, and I don't know how to get it back. So I thought, nah, I'm just going to continue. It hasn't been easy. Nobody would have blamed me if I decided to come back home. But then another thought entered my mind. I had already come this far. I had spent months preparing. I'd overcome every obstacle that had once convinced me this trip was impossible. If I turned around now, I knew I'd spend the rest of my life wondering what could have been. So I chose to keep going. Looking back, I realized that decision had very little to do with travel. It was about refusing to let fear make my decisions. Hour after hour, flight after flight, I moved closer to the other side of the world. When I departed Hawaii, something changed. For the first time in my life, I was leaving the United States. I was leaving my home and my comfort zone. Watching the flight map on the screen in front of me as our plane crossed the Pacific Ocean was an unforgettable experience. It finally hit me just how far I had come. There was no turning back now. The journey had officially begun. After many long hours in the air and another connection through Guam, I finally landed in Manila. I will never forget stepping off that airplane. The first thing I noticed was the heat. Even though it was late at night, the warm tropical air hit me immediately. Then I noticed the crowds. The airport was alive with people, energy, and activity unlike anything I had experienced before. I'll admit, I was nervous. Everything was unfamiliar. I was exhausted from traveling, overwhelmed by my surroundings, and wondering if I had made the right decision. But something unexpected happened. Instead of feeling alone, I began meeting people who showed me genuine kindness. A friendly airport employee took the time to talk with me and help me feel comfortable. Small conversations like that reminded me that although I was thousands of miles from home, kindness is a language that doesn't require translation. That simple act of compassion helped calm my nerves and gave me the confidence to keep moving forward. The next morning, I boarded one final flight to Bohol. I had no idea that my life was about to change forever. As the plane descended into Bohol, I looked out the window and saw crystal blue water, lush green landscapes, and islands that resembled my days as a kid watching these top 10 beach destinations on the Travel Channel. It was unlike anything I had ever seen with my own two eyes before. After months of planning, days of traveling, and years of dreaming, I had finally made it. When I walked out of the airport, one of my friends was waiting for me. She greeted me with a warm smile and gave me a hug. In that moment, something incredible happened. All of the fear that had followed me across the world began to disappear. For the first time since leaving home, I felt completely at ease. Over the next 10 days, I experienced a country that exceeded every expectation I had. The Philippines wasn't just beautiful because of its beaches or islands. It was beautiful because of its people. Everywhere I went, I encountered kindness. People welcomed me into their lives. They shared meals with me, laughed with me, and treated me not as a stranger, but as a friend. For someone who had spent much of his life feeling different because of autism, that meant more than I can adequately put into words. Back home, I had often felt misunderstood. I worried about how people perceived me. I worried about fitting in. I worried about saying the wrong thing or standing out for the wrong reasons. But in the Philippines, those worries slowly disappeared. People weren't interested in judging me. They wanted to know who I was. They cared about the person standing in front of them, not the labels attached to it. That was one of the most meaningful experiences of my life. The trip also taught me something about myself. For years, I believed I needed someone else to help me chase my dreams. I thought I needed someone to travel with, someone to guide me, someone to give me confidence. But somewhere along the journey, I realized something. The person I had been waiting for was me. Every airport I navigated, every obstacle I overcame, every decision I made, those were victories that proved I was far more capable than I had ever believed. Travel didn't remove my autism. It didn't magically eliminate my anxiety. Those challenges are still a part of who I am. What changed was my confidence. I learned that courage isn't the absence of fear. Courage is moving forward despite it. Looking back now, I don't remember the long flights as much as I remember the people. I remember the conversations, the laughter, the friendships, the generosity, the feeling of belonging in a place that was completely unfamiliar only days before. By the time it was time to return home, something unexpected happened. I didn't want to leave. When my flight departed the Philippines, I felt something I had never experienced before. I was actually feeling homesick. But I wasn't homesick for the United States. I was homesick for the Philippines. That feeling confused a lot of people when I tried to explain it. How could I feel homesick for a country I had only known for 10 days? The answer is simple. Home isn't always where you've lived the longest. Sometimes home is where you discover a part of yourself that you never knew existed. That first trip changed me forever. Since then, I've returned to the Philippines multiple times, spending months exploring the country, reconnecting with friends, and creating memories I'll treasure for the rest of my life. Each visit has reminded me why I fell in love with the country in the first place. But perhaps the greatest gift the Philippines gave me wasn't a destination, it was perspective. It reminded me that people are often kinder than we expect. That fear is usually much bigger in our minds than it is in reality. And that the biggest adventures begin with one simple decision, to say yes even when you're afraid. When I was a little boy watching the Travel Channel at my grandmother's house, I never imagined that one day I would be standing halfway around the world living the very dream I used to write about in a notebook. If there's one lesson I hope you take from my story, it's this. Don't let fear make your decisions. Whether your dream is to travel the world, start a new career, go back to school, or simply step outside your comfort zone, don't wait until you feel completely ready. You may never feel completely ready. Take the first step anyway. The greatest moments of your life are often waiting just beyond the things that scare you the most. For me, that first step was pressing a button to buy a plane ticket. That single decision changed the course of my life.